Good morning. This is Paloma Perez, the Press Secretary for the FCC. Welcome to this background webinar on the FCC's National Broadband Map. As Chairwoman Rosenworcel announced last week, the second version of the map we intend to publish on May 30th. This call is for members of the press only and is on background. And by background, we mean you can summarize what is shared, but not directly quote the speaker. If you need to attribute the information, please do so from a senior FCC official. And with that, I'll turn it to our broadband expert, Ed Bartholome, who will provide an overview of the new map, show how to use it, and we'll take a few questions through the chat function. And again, today's call is on background, so I'll turn it over to Ed now.
Thanks, Paloma. And thanks, everybody, for taking time to join us today. As Paloma mentioned, we're going to give you an overview and some updates on the FCC's National Broadband Map. So I think a helpful starting point is to discuss what goes into the National Broadband Map. For background, Congress directed the FCC in the Broadband Data Act to transition from collecting broadband availability information at the census block level to a more granular location by location collection. That act predates IIJA, just for reference and sort of timing purposes. So there are two primary data sets that flow into the National Broadband Map. The first is the Fabric list of locations. And I think it's, that list is a unique data set that is new and that the FCC created for the purposes of developing the National Broadband Map. Many of you may be aware that that is developed by CostQuest in conjunction with the FCC, and that was done as part of a federal procurement process. And that list is a list of all the locations in the United States and territories where we believe fixed broadband internet access services are or could be installed. And this effort is also, it's important to note, focused on mass market broadband services. So those are services that we expect to be used by homes and small businesses. It's the sort of off-the-rack offering. So if you call up a local service provider and you order the 50 down package or the 100 down package, these are different and distinct from more enterprise class services, which would not necessarily be reflected in the National Broadband Map and are not part of the data that we are collecting from providers. Availability data. So as is required by the Act, we collect availability data from broadband providers twice a year. That data set is lined up against the list of locations included in the Fabric. So two times a year, we release an updated version of the location list or the Fabric. Broadband providers then have a 2-month period roughly to report their availability against that list. And then that leads to the publication of an updated version of the map. So as you look at this slide, just calling your attention to the very bottom of the slide on the left and right, where it talks about what's currently on the map. So when you go to the map today, what's shown here is accurate. Version 1 of the Fabric, which we released in June of 2022, is currently displayed on the Fabric, along with availability data from providers that they reported for their services as of June 30th. That's a snapshot date. Next week, when we update the map to the second version or the second iteration of the Fabric data, this will change. And what will be shown currently on the live map will be version 2 of the Fabric. So that's that updated list of locations, as well as provider availability based on what they had available in the marketplace as of December 31st of 2022. Both of these data sets can be challenged, and that was also something that was required by the Act. We are required to collect the data and then make it available to the public and to stakeholders for the purposes of challenges. We'll talk a little bit more about those challenge processes as we go through the rest of the presentation here. So I've mentioned, and as Paloma started us off with, the next iteration of the map will be released on May 30th. And this is an update that will reflect those new Fabric additions, as well as that updated availability data. So what will be different? We're going to have over 1 million more broadband serviceable locations throughout the United States than what was included in the initial version that was released last November. And every state and territory will have both added locations in version 2 and potentially have had some locations removed. Removals are typically connected to things like false positives. So maybe we identified a rock or something like that as a location when it's really not. There are other instances where structures may burn down or become vacated and they would no longer be broadband serviceable locations. So this is the National Broadband Map. If anybody joining us today has not seen it before, we're going to do a brief demo of the map following these couple slides we're going to show. But just, this is the home page. This is the primary destination where most people go. You can see that very prominently search by address is the first thing you see, and that is available at broadbandmap.gov. I mentioned challenges, and these are a really important part of our effort. So this is new and unique, right? In the 477 collection process, it was based on census block levels. It was, uniquely what providers were reporting to the FCC, and there were not opportunities for the public to engage or challenge what had been reported. In this version of our collection, the broadband data collection that informs the National Broadband Map, we do have challenge opportunities. One of those is our location challenges. So you can tell us when we have an address incorrect, a unit count incorrect. Perhaps we've chosen the wrong placement on the map for the quote unquote dot where service is being reported or could be reported. You can also let us know if we're missing a location so that it can be added to future versions of the map. All of these challenges can be done directly through the map interface or through a separate bulk challenge process where you can let us know that there are issues with multiple locations in a single filing. In addition to location challenges, you can also challenge provider reported availability. For the purposes of the broadband data collection and for showing availability on the National Broadband Map, a provider has to be able to make service available within 10 business days for a standard installation fee. So there can be no excessive charges for, extending a line down a driveway or other examples of that. It's 10 business days for a standard installation fee. So as a user looks at the map and they see a provider who isn't actually available at their location, they can challenge that. I want to kind of go a little bit deeper on the types of things that can be challenged as we look at provider reported availability. So these are the 9 different codes that are in the system, or it's a drop down really in the user interface, and you just select one from this list. So the provider either failed to schedule an install or failed to perform the install within the required 10 days. They may have requested excess charges. They may have just flat out said they can't serve the location. And this could be as simple as checking the website and entering your address and getting a message back saying that they don't serve the location. The reported service type might not be offered. So again, maybe they've listed this as a fiber location when all they offer is a copper service or something similar to that. The reported speed is not available for purchase. So it's really important to keep in mind that what we are showing on the National Broadband Map is the maximum speed that the provider will make available for purchase at that location. It is not what network performance a consumer or a customer might expect at that location. That's different than what they will make available for purchase. So that's why we've got this distinct reason code that the speed reported is not available for purchase. In instances where the individual is not happy with the speeds that they're getting, so they feel like they're not getting what they're paying for, or their network performance doesn't match the package they're paying for, we do invite them to file an informal consumer complaint. That's a separate process. It does not result in a challenge to the map, but we do have that list on the menu as a tool for consumers to use and to help drive them to our consumer complaint process. The last 2 options are really specific to satellite and fixed wireless services. So this is where the signal's not available, perhaps the line of sight, maybe there's trees or something else in the way that's preventing that household from getting the signal from the wireless provider or from the satellite provider. Or demand for additional construction. So this would be something like they want to put up a tower on your property in order to install the antenna so you get the signal. That can be another reason why you can challenge the reported availability shown on the map. I want to touch base on some of the important work we've been doing outside of the challenge process or in conjunction with the challenge process. So the Broadband Data Act gave the Commission a few new tools. In addition to the collection itself, We also have the challenge process, as I've mentioned, and we have over 4 million challenges thus far that have been sent to providers for response. As those challenges are resolved, the data on the map is updated on an every other week cadence, so that data set is constantly evolving in sort of near to real time for challenge outcomes. Beyond the challenge process, we also have verification and audit tools, and we've been using those tools. Thus far, the FCC has contacted over 800 filers to ask additional questions about their filing. In some instances, we might ask for them to provide us with network infrastructure data or other types of, fact-based information that would back up their reported availability to location. These verification efforts have been very successful thus far. They often result in corrections to reported availability. Sometimes those corrections are relatively minor in nature, and it's sort of on the margins, correcting a few locations here or there. Other times, it really shows that the effort was successful in helping the provider to better understand the type of data that we're trying to collect and the purpose of this collection. And in those instances, it can result in many more locations being updated as a result of that outreach and engagement with the provider. Again, the website for the map is broadbandmap.gov. You can find a lot more about the collection and how we're making the map and the different ways that stakeholders can participate by visiting fcc.gov/broadband data. I do want to quickly switch over to provide a demo of the map itself. So I'm going to pull down the slide deck briefly here, and then I'm going to put up a different screen share here really quick and walk you through a few quick things related to the map itself. So as you can see, we've got the homepage here. Again, I mentioned that the most common and prominent thing is search by address. Quickly, though, there are some other options that you can get to from here. One is the location summary page. Another is a provider summary page. We also offer an area summary page. Just to maybe start there briefly, on this page, you have the ability to look specifically at either a state, a county, a congressional district, a census place, a tribal area, or by CBSA. So if we want to just look at a state, you can start to type in a state, you can complete it and hit enter, or you can choose it from the drop-down list. But basically, it gives you a quick overview of what's going on in that state. And you can see that the default settings on the map align with the FCC's definition of broadband service. And that definition is any technology for speeds greater than 25.3. I think that there's a lot of focus right now in the broadband ecosystem around the way that the BEAD program defines broad eligible services. So there's a way to filter the map pretty quickly to look at it through that lens. So if you go to the little gear shift on the right side and you adjust the filter to only show all wired and licensed fixed wireless services at speeds greater than 25.3, that will update the map in pretty real time to making that selection. And then you can see that, the picture's a little different, right? We quickly move from blanket coverage to seeing that within the state of Nebraska, there are some areas that don't have any reported services that are either wired or licensed fixed wireless at speeds greater than 25.3. So, this is a good tool to get a quick overview of what's going on in an area. And I just wanted to make sure everybody had awareness of that. If you want to do a deeper dive on what's been reported, I would suggest that you head over to the data download page. Again, you can use this as a way to select by state. So sticking with our Nebraska theme here, if you select Nebraska from the dropdown, you can then start to download the reported availability that providers have given to the FCC. And this does reflect any challenge outcomes or other corrections to filings that providers have made since their original reporting of this data last summer. You've got a lot of different options for how you can download the data and make use of it here, but just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of the data download page as well. Going back to the home page, just to kind of show what we would expect to be a normal user experience, As you type in an address, much like many search options today, it pre-populates with options. You can either pick from the list or you can type in the full address and hit enter. Once you're here, you'll see that we've got, these green dots that are showing that service is available. If we change these filters and kind of move the picture here a little bit, again, going back to that all wired and licensed fixed wireless setting and maybe bumping up the speeds here, you can see that some of these dots went from green to red, and that indicates that they do not have services that align with the current filter setting. So they would sort of be not served based on that filter setting. Once you're on any of the dots over to the right, you've got location summary information. If any of this is incorrect, you can click on that location challenge option, put in your name and email address, phone number is optional, select the reason why you're challenging. So maybe this is a house with an accessory dwelling unit or a English basement apartment, something like that. So the unit count's incorrect. You can select that, update that unit count for us, give us a brief description of why you're doing this, such as I live here and I know that I have a second unit at this location. Optionally, you can upload a file to support that, and then you would click the certification and hit submit. As you select different options, this does become a responsive form. So if you say the location's not within the building footprint, you actually get this little pin that you can drag and drop and say, no, it shouldn't be this first location, but it should be this other structure over here that's actually the broadband serviceable location on my property. Just some examples of the ways that you can challenge location information directly through the map interface. To challenge provider reported availability data, that's a little further down on this menu on the right. You've got availability challenge here. You can click on that. You can then select the provider you want to challenge. So in this instance, if I don't believe that Comcast really offers gigabit service at this location, you could select them from this list. You then let the FCC know that you want to send this challenge to the selected provider. Again, we need a name and an email address, phone number being optional. And then you select from those 9 reasons, or at least the relevant reasons for this type of technology, which is reported as cable at this location. So maybe the denied a request for service. You can put in the date that you attempted that request for service. You can put in the method that you use. So maybe you went to their website. Again, a brief description, visited their website, entered my address, showed service wasn't available. You can upload files. So for example, if you have a screenshot of that website saying service isn't available, or maybe you've got a chat session that you printed out with somebody from that company indicating that service wasn't available, that can be optionally uploaded. It is not required to submit a consumer challenge or an individual challenge. Again, we need you to certify, you hit submit. That then goes to the FCC for review. Once the FCC reviews those challenges, they are passed along to providers who have an initial 60 days to decide if they're going to concede or dispute that challenge. If they do decide to concede, it updates within 2 weeks on the map interface. If they decide to dispute the challenge, it starts another 60-day period where they are to work with the challenger to try to come to a common understanding of the situation. If they can't reach agreement, it does go to the FCC for adjudication. The FCC will then adjudicate the outcome, and based on either the FCC upholding or overturning the challenge, the map would then again update to reflect that outcome and change the reported availability at that location. So those were the things I wanted to make sure we covered today. I'm happy to pull the screen share down now and turn it over to the Q&A session. I think, Paloma, you were going to jump in and maybe help drive some of the questions.
Yep. All right. So one of our first questions is the 1 million new broadband serviceable locations figure a net increase? Does it include, or does it account for the locations removed?
It is a net increase. I believe that there were around 3 million total locations added and about 2 million total locations that were removed from the map. So it is a net increase.
Thank you, Ed. Our next question is, do we plan on sharing these slides? A lot of folks want to see if we can share with them. I think so. I think the plan is to have this webinar as a resource, so we'll make sure the slides that accompany it are also available. I think those are the big, broad questions that we have. I know folks threw in a couple of more specific ones that we're happy to follow up with afterward. There was a couple questions about the data.
And maybe, Paloma, just one more thing to sort of touch base on that net increase. And I think this helps kind of put the numbers in context sometimes. In version 1 of the data set, there were just over 113 million locations nationally. In version 2, we're going to be just over 114 million total locations nationally.
Yeah, because we had a question about Maxios about whether we could put that 4 million challenges into context. And is that a lot compared to the data being input, or is that what you were expecting? Which I think your answer just helped answer. So that was taken care of. If there are no additional questions that are about the mapping interface, I see a couple of folks who shared some more specific ones, which we'll be happy to follow up with. I see Ryan, I see a question from Joan too, that are a little more specific that we can follow up with afterward. But if there's no additional questions, I will wrap us up. I've got one more question, which is, what is the FCC hoping to achieve with this update? Do you want more consumers to offer feedback? I think that's a great opportunity to highlight that we're doing this every 6 months.
Yeah, so I somehow failed to really dive in on that during the presentation, but this is a continual iterative process. So we will continue to collect data from providers every 6 months. We will continue to update the map. And yes, we do want more consumer feedback. We want more stakeholder participation broadly. We think that, the goal here is to have the most accurate set of data we can have. And one of the best ways to do that is through that direct on the ground participation. Nobody knows what's truly available at their location better than the person who either lives or operates a small business at that location. So yeah, we would really appreciate more consumer feedback and just more general feedback in the challenge processes as we continue to refine and improve the accuracy of this data set.
All right, I think that was our last question, Ed. So with that, I'll wrap us up. I want to say thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. We appreciate you taking the time. Should you need additional information, please don't hesitate to contact me or anyone else in the FCC Office of Media Relations team at mediarelations@fcc.gov. At this point, we'll conclude today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.